This particular three-part session, you're going to experience three different panel discussions, conversations, is happening within the context of a larger framed event, which is the Global Interdisciplinary Green Cities Conference. So if you're an academic here and you traveled from Texas or Oregon, raise your hand so we know, or Massachusetts or Rhode Island. So we have a few people here who are researchers. They might be studying something that you care deeply about. They might also be available for conversation at the end. So if you do run into a researcher, do some research with them. Ask them a few questions and grab their card. Maybe they'll be helpful to your interests. It's my pleasure always to announce or introduce Ben Sosne, who is the executive director. He's going to take the first event, and then we're going to do introductions as we go through the events, the three events. So Ben Sosne, take it from here. You're going to introduce folks, and then you're going to moderate, which isn't what you expected to do, but it's what you're going to do.
We talk here at the BIC about adaptability. So you're going to see that firsthand today, how adaptable we all are to different panels. So Tanya from Williams College is not me. She was at a conference in New Hampshire and I think got delayed a little bit on her way down. So we're on a tight schedule, so I'm happy to serve in her place. And really happy to be joined by the gentleman to my right, the two gentlemen to my right, Galen Nelson, who is a Chief Program Officer with Massachusetts Clean Energy Center, and Senator Paul Mark, who many of you know represents the 57 towns and cities of Western Massachusetts. And I want to thank them both for their long support of the Berkshire Innovation Center and our region. And we're here on an issue that's obviously near and dear to Galen's heart, because this is what he's been doing for a decade at the Clean Energy Center and a long time before that, but also near and dear to Senator Mark's heart, because you're not here just because you represent this, you happen to represent the district. You're here because you've been fighting on some of these fronts for longer than it's been fashionable. Is that a fair way to say? So I'll tell you real quick, this is what I was going to say as I introduced them, that, I've personally, when I took this job almost 5 years ago now, I talked to our board and I said, I want to put when we talk about an innovation center, I want to make sure we have a climate and clean energy thumbprint on this place. It's something that's near and dear to me, both because I believe it's one of the greatest challenges of our generation, but also because I believe it's a huge economic development opportunity, and I think something that's really ripe for our region. And I was inspired when Governor Healy did her inaugural address, and she said she wanted to create a climate corridor from the Berkshires to Barnstable. I have that, it rolls off my tongue now because I've only repeated it a couple hundred times. When we talk about Massachusetts being the global leader in combating climate change, when we talk about Massachusetts being using this as a lever for economic development, in the same vein that we became a leader in the life science space. Maybe I'll ask you, Galen, to start first. Where do you see the greatest challenges and opportunities in that vision?
Yeah, thank you, Ben, and it's good to be here with all of you. I have been at Mass EC for over a decade, and prior to working at the state level, I worked at the city of Boston, and actually have roots in the area. Both of my parents grew up in Pittsfield, went on their first date in Dalton, which they used to tell me. And both of my grandfathers worked at the GE, as they called it, and so I definitely spent a lot of summers here, swimming in the lakes and just enjoying the Berkshires. So. So I do like to think of, there are many challenges, I think, and opportunities that we have here with regard to making this state a global leader in climate tech innovation. We already have a significant lead, which is wonderful, but this is no time to rest on our laurels. A lot of other states are investing aggressively in climate innovation, and we need to step up our game if we're to maintain our leadership position. So. Just a couple quick examples. One is that we're really, really good at helping very early stage companies. So if you think about PIs at academic institutions, private entrepreneurs in the private sector, innovators, developing new climate technologies. We're very, very good at supporting that early stage innovation. We have competitive grant programs to help innovators develop prototypes, to deploy that technology in a so-called operational environment, or to get their first customer, to kind of overcome some of those commercialization valleys of death, as they're dramatically called. And then we're pretty good at the next step. So again, that's kind of getting an innovator to their first customer. The next step is okay, you've got your first customer, how do you get to customers 2 through 100 notionally, right? That's where our kind of market transformation, our market development works in, where we provide incentives and create programs to essentially create synthetic market conditions that help create market demand for these early stage technologies. So a great example of this is, some of you may have heard about Sublime Systems, the low carbon cement company that just opened up their first manufacturing facility in Holyoke. Really exciting. We played a role in supporting them. The federal government played a really significant role in supporting them. The city of Holyoke has done amazing work to attract them and support them. We're very happy for them. But how do you continue the momentum? Well, that's why the Mass Clean Energy Center launched a embodied carbon challenge, so that we could begin to create some market demand for products, including cement, that have low embodied carbon. So this is how we help companies with that kind of next stage of development. But we have to move beyond that, right? You can invest in innovation that results in reductions in costs, but to really get to where we need to be, where we see the rate of critical climate tech being adopted at scale, is you need to achieve scale with manufacturing and with demand. And there, I think that's where the state has a great opportunity. And as Ben noted, the Mass Leads Act, I think, will get us there in providing significant funding, on a competitive basis, both in terms of capital expenditure support and tax credits, to help growing companies so that they can not just launch here in the state and not just begin to grow, but also to scale. And again, that will deliver incredible economic benefits in terms of leveraged private investment to the state, but it will also allow us to export these incredible innovative climate solutions to the rest of the world.
That's great, thank you. Senator Mark, I want pass it over to you to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been working on for well over a decade, but then come back to some of the things that are currently going in the Senate right now. I know there's a new bill specifically focused on a climate bill. And as you think about that new bill and talk a little bit about it, maybe think, I think the audience would really like to hear about some of the ways that bill may not just impact the Commonwealth as a whole, but specifically your region and some of the more rural regions of the Commonwealth, and how we could leverage that out here.
Right, yes, so what we're working on this week in the Senate is going to be this Thursday, and we had a caucus about it this morning. We're talking about energy siting and really grid modernization. And so when we talk about goals, we want the state to do such by a certain date. We care about our impact on the world, we care about our impact both economically, environmentally, and trying to make this transition and trying to do it successfully. What we've been finding at this point is some of the non-glamorous stuff. So having a goal of, we want to be somewhere by 2050, having a goal of electric cars by 2035, that's all great. But then you meet these bottlenecks, like there's not enough substations. What's a substation? So literally a place where energy is either stepped up or stepped down. And in my district specifically, so I was on a call last week with a nice group of environmental activists from my district. And the gentleman asked me, now, Paul, will you buy an electric vehicle? And my first response was, as soon as you pay for it, yes, I'll be able to afford it. And then my second response was, even if I had the money, even if I was buying any kind of a vehicle right now, the problem is in my district, which is 50-ish really rural communities and then some small and medium-sized cities like Pittsfield and North Adams, if I got in my car and I drove somewhere, I wouldn't have the capacity to charge. I can't get, and I'm a rare person, I do over 1,000 miles a week in my car, but I wouldn't have the capacity to adequately charge. And one of the reasons for that isn't because people here don't care about the environment. Of course we care about the environment, but you don't have the electrical capacity. So trying to work on non-glamorous things like that, that are going to meet with time's backlash, because when you're a legislator, you're talking about policy and politics. And so I like siting. My really small towns of less than 1,000 people, they like having control over siting. And so we got to balance that with how does a town like Peru have a say and have its local government stay intact, while also recognizing if we don't meet these goals, if we don't make this transition, if we don't do something that can't be bogged down infinitely in court proceedings and small town politics, we're not going to meet these goals that are so important for the future of our whole planet. So it's a lot.
Right. Galen, I've heard Secretary Howe talk a lot about the sort of, she uses the phrase, the right to win. And there's certain areas in Massachusetts that we have the right to win. And we could say broadly we have the right to win in life science or in climate tech. But as you drill deeper into that, are there areas around the climate change challenges and climate change opportunities where you think you're seeing Massachusetts kind of has almost a more of a right to win? Is it around ag tech? Is it around food production? And what are the assets that you see us leveraging best?
Sure. No, I think that's a great question. I first just reacting to the Senator's comments. Yes, siting and permitting, a really incredible challenge for the state, and I want to commend both the Commission on energy infrastructure siting and planning, as well as the Senate's work on it. I feel like there's mostly a meeting of the minds, and I think we're going to get to a good place, but you're absolutely right that unless we solve this siting and permitting challenge and have a greater alignment with siting and permitting from both the state and local perspectives, we will not meet our goals. So it's not a very sexy issue to talk about, but it's absolutely mission critical to deploying the clean energy that we need, including the electrical distribution system infrastructure that we need to meet our goals. So with regard to right to win, yes, I mean, we've got so much going for us in this state. We are absolutely an innovation powerhouse with our high-tech colleges and universities. We're really good at spinning out those ideas, again, oftentimes with support from our organization, the Mass Clean Energy Center, but they're also, these innovators are winning tons of federal grants as well. So we do a really good job there. Because of the proximity between manufacturers and many of the startup companies here, the startup companies that are building hard tech, hardware, they can rapidly iterate with those manufacturers, so they can work with manufacturers and develop a prototype. And whereas they couldn't do this if the manufacturer were located across the ocean, they can rapidly go back and forth with that manufacturer and make rapid changes to those prototypes and make gradual improvements to their products. So I think with regard to rapid iteration, ideation, support for those early stage companies, I think that's where we really shine and have a right to win. We need to continue to lean into that. As I noted, I think we can make more investments in market transformation to help the companies with that customers 2 through 100. I also think it's important to acknowledge we're never going to compete with states that have land that is a tiny fraction of the cost of land, even here in the Berkshires, or energy that's a tiny fraction and often, frankly, a lot dirtier energy, but that is substantially less expensive. We're never going to be able to attract the really, really large manufacturers. That's fine. We can do a better job of retaining our existing very agile R&D and contract manufacturers that provide really high value, really high precision manufacturing. And we may be able to land a few big fish with a few sites across the state, but we should be realistic about the types of manufacturing and the types of companies that are realistic for us to both expand and attract, and where it doesn't make sense for us to expend resources.
Yeah, that's great. Senator Mark, I want you to feel free to respond to that, but I do have another question that's specific to something you've been working on, and I know it's an issue. Obviously, when we talk about economic development challenges around here and anywhere right now in the Commonwealth, almost the first thing you hear from people is housing. I know there's some work done around climate financing, particularly around the housing now, but climate financing is something that you've been focused on for a long time. So maybe you could speak to some of the almost low-hanging fruit or some of those items that are creeping up quicker than others perhaps, or in general?
Yeah, for a long time, for at least 10 years, I had been working on a concept that I actually discovered from Connecticut called the Green Bank. And the Green Bank, the way it works in practice is it becomes like almost a revolving loan fund that can lend out or even offer grants to individuals, organizations, municipalities. And over the 10 years that I worked on this issue, it passed the House once as a bill called GreenWorks, and that was going to be municipally funded, $1 billion, $100 million a year, 10% guaranteed to rural communities. And I think we got that passed right around February of 2020, and then something happened that suddenly took the spotlight, and that all got backburnered. And then you fast forward that a concept, it kept getting talked about. Our own U.S. Senator Ed Markey, in the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, was able to get, I think, about $29 billion available nationally that states like Massachusetts could tap into. I had filed a bill to house the Green Bank in the CEC, which I thought was a great organization, a great place
Thank
with
you.
with a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And but I'll give a lot of credit. Governor Healy came into office, loved the concept, saw a compatible concern with housing and with making housing affordable in the long term, and also making maybe buildings that could be used for housing more green, more sustainable, and also, again, more affordable in the long term. Created the first green bank in Massachusetts, which is now called the Massachusetts Community Climate Bank, and for better or for worse, is starting off in the Department of Housing. And so it's going to be the first green bank in the country dedicated to housing. And I just heard very recently they are announcing their first program that's going to be available. And the best part of this is it leverages our ability to compete for that whole $28 billion that's available nationally. And so in my vision and in vision of friends and collaborators, while we start with housing, this can become something bigger. It can be something that can be available, again, for small towns. I'm looking at Rich. Wacona High School, which is local, wanted to invest in net zero. The price was unaffordable for the local communities, the small towns that are paying the bill over the next however many decades. And this green bank could have made the difference to get us there. And that's something I think is really important for our area and also for our state.
I want to dig deeper into that a little bit with both of you, both on the Green Bank, but also you bring up this idea of the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, and how much federal sort of dollars and I don't want to say prizes, but states are actively competing for it. So I guess I'll open it up and you guys can choose, but where do you see those opportunities right now of the administration and going after those federal dollars, which could sort of move some of these ideas, move the needle much faster on some of these if we're able to succeed?
Well, the GGRF is one, so the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is the fund the senator referenced. And I think we are very well positioned to go after that funding. In fact, we were just awarded Solar for All funding, which is one of the buckets in that. It's all very bureaucratic, but there are 3 buckets within the GGRF, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, and we were just awarded, I should know this figure off the top of my head, I think it was $158 million to deploy solar primarily to low to moderate income households across the state. So that's really exciting, a great win for the state. Completely agree with and endorse everything the senator said about kind of the history of the Green Bank. We were so delighted. We had launched a study effort with the city of Boston, actually, to look at what a state climate bank or green bank should look like, what the business model would look like, what types of products would it offer. And when we were in the middle of that, we heard from our legislative affairs director, Senator Mark has, filed a climate bank bill again and wants to talk to the folks working on this. So we had a great call with the Senate. We were so delighted that there was someone in the Senate focused on and obsessed about climate finance as we were. And I do like to think of it as one of these cross-cutting issues, right? You can talk about all the work we need to do to decarbonize the built environment and to decarbonize the transportation sector and in the industrial sector. And workforce and climate finance are 2 issues that I see as very cross-cutting, right? We need to make massive investments in workforce in order to achieve all of our objectives. And we need really novel, patient capital, novel climate finance products to support a lot of these efforts that cannot be met and cannot be financed with conventional financing approaches. So I didn't really answer your question, though, which is that there are many, many examples. Fortunately, we have a federal funding office in the administration. There are many examples of grants that are already being awarded to the state There are staff that spend all of their time looking for those opportunities. It is a lot of work to apply for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's important for Massachusetts citizens to be aware of, is that, they see all this federal funding, but it's a lot of work for government employees to actually pursue, whether they're at the city level, particularly at the city level, or even the state level. So we're certainly going after a lot of them across the board.
Yeah.
There's such a wide array of those opportunities, it would be too difficult to name them.
Senator Mark, you were here. We did a talk shortly after Secretary Howe got appointed. Ben Downing, your friend, was on the panel, and one thing that came up from an audience question, in fact, Doug Crane, who many people know, raised it, is, hey, look, if we're going to transition this whole state, and we're going to hit these goals, whether they're 2030 or 2050, there's going to have to be sort of pilot projects, and we're going to have demonstration sites. And his sort of premise, which he self-admittedly said, hey, look, this is, nowhere near fully formed. But the idea is, if the grid here is complex, but not as complex as the grid in other places, just because our size. The political climate is sort of ripe for a clean energy pilot project, for being a model. And if he said, if you can take a county with 126,000 people and transition that county first and do something in Berkshire County, how the heck are you going to do it for the whole state? How are you going to do it for places like Worcester or Cambridge or Boston? How are you going to do it? So is there a role for our region to play? And what could that be as hey, we'll show you how to do it first on a smaller scale, and then we'll work out some kinks. That question's been resonating a lot with me, so.
Yeah, policymakers, people that have to face election fairly frequently and repeatedly, they really like to show wins, they like to show progress, they like to show success. So if a region, whether it's the Berkshires, Cape Cod, anywhere in Massachusetts, if a region comes up with a plan and an idea that is going to be good, that is clearly going to be successful, and then can be replicated other people, that is one of the best ways to get political figures and administration officials behind it, and then to get funding committed. It goes back to, I think, the stimulus in 2009, 2010, shovel-ready. The more shovel-ready, the more grid-ready, the more ready to show success that a project is, the better off your chances of getting funding, of getting that spotlight, and then again, of serving as a model that can be successful and replicated. Really is, and that's one of the best parts of this job is I get to know people that have expertise, and they get to be my go-to people, and then you make me look good, because then when I'm in the Senate, people say, oh, wow, Berkshire's is kicking butt on this, that, and the other thing, and our reputation and our word becomes more important and carries way more weight. And when I say that whole thing about having 57 cities or towns, we all represent 170,000 people. But to find 170,000 people out here, it's 57 towns. There's 4 senators that cover Boston. So we're always outnumbered. So the more we can do by winning with our mind, the better off we're going to be when I'm in that arena. So
I love that.
Yeah, me too.
We have a few minutes, and I just want to make sure, there'll be a chance at the end of everything to ask some questions, but I do want to make sure we have a chance, as you gentlemen are up here, to hear some questions from the audience. So anybody out there have a question for Thomas?
Galen, how are you? Thomas Poston from Wisecott, US.
Hi.
Question on the embodied carbon challenge for C&I in
Yes.
different districts. How does that work?
So the idea was we wanted to recognize companies, and the initial focus is on carbon and on concrete and steel. Recognize the design and engineering community and commercial real estate developers that were deploying emerging low embodied carbon alternatives to their higher embodied carbon kind of business as usual counterparts. So there's low embodied cement, carbon cement, and there are other low embodied carbon products. And in fact, that's what's happening. There are projects that will be awarded very soon, actually, at the Embodied Carbon Conference coming up in Boston in, I think, a matter of days. And so that's what we're doing, is we're kind of recognizing these market leaders. And the idea is that will bring attention to these products, demonstrate that they are commercially viable, that they can perform the same, often in a way that's superior to their conventional alternatives.
Was Unistress one of those companies in Pittsfield?
I'm not sure. Yeah.
I have a microphone back here for the next question, so whoever has the next question, ask me for the microphone, please.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Hi, guys. I'm Andreas Schmid from Solect Energy. We put the solar on the roof here. We put solar on a lot of schools. And when we talk about shovel-ready clean energy projects that are ready to help us move the needle, there's a lot of schools out there that want to do solar, a lot of school districts that want to do more solar, but they can't get the MSBA funding to replace their roof, even if they have a shovel-ready solar project that's all signed on, ready to go, incentives, interconnection approvals, which is an issue. So if you have an interconnection approval, it's gold. But if you have all that due diligence done, and the last thing you need to do is replace your roof, it's hard to get that done. So the Green School Works program was implemented, and big win. Thank you, Senator Mark, for getting that through as a budget line item. $50 million for schools with solar projects ready to go.
Which came to us.
To replace their roofs, right. So now the CEC and DESE, the Division of Elementary and Secondary Education, Department, DESE, is going to administer that program. But there's a lot of work you mentioned non-sexy work that needs to get done.
Yeah.
When and how do you anticipate being able to roll out that program with Mass CEC and DESE being the administrators of it? Because I understand that $50 million was pulled and pushed to next year. So, a lot of schools are hoping that applications will open for that program to move the needle on clean energy and deployment of clean energy and shovel-ready projects that will also help the district financially.
Sure.
So is there any thoughts on when that might happen? And
So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you a very specific answer right now. That is work that's happening at our organization. We've had a lot of coordination meetings with DESE. We've got kind of preliminary design guidelines, if you will, for a program, so the rough parameters of a program. The roof repair work has come up multiple times. It's something that's on our radar. We have very good people working on this project. We're really excited about it. But I don't know whether or not we've reached kind of a final consensus on the program guidelines, but I'm happy to hear this feedback, and I'll bring that back to the team and let them know people are talking about the roof repair issue, because it is an issue for, you could be the smallest single-family homeowner up to the largest commercial facility, that if your roof needs issues, it's a barrier to solar. But we're really excited about the program in which we're thinking about energy resilience. It's allowed us to think about tree planting, all these things that should be part of a Green Schools program. So we're really proud to be administering it. But I'll have to get back to you on the specifics of the timing and the roof issue in particular, because I don't know off the top of my head.
And I'll just quickly throw in, this is back to that initial issue I talked about, is like there's great ideas and then there's making them actually happen. So on Thursday, I'm going to file an amendment to this bill that is a bill that I've been carrying over the year and has passed through the committee that would require on every new public building solar or its equivalent net zero. And now you're making me think, if that happens, how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to make it happen? Who's going to be the workforce? All of that. So good ideas, unfortunately, often take time to actually make into reality. So I agree. Thank you for bringing it up. And the town of Clarksburg would love to hear this and have this happen, I know, specifically locally.
Okay, we're gonna have one more by Eric here, and then we're gonna wrap.
Great panel. Senator Mark, nice to meet you. I'm Eric Planey with Solar Block Construction Solar Startup here in the Berkshires. So you love talking about bragging about the Berkshires. Well, obviously, Ben and the BIC got some great news last week where they're one of 7 hubs designated by the U.S. Department of Energy to go to the next stage for clean tech supply chain manufacturing hub. I know I've been on panels in the BIC and been involved in conversations where we talk about in Massachusetts how a lot of great innovation comes out of Boston, Cambridge, but when they become commercialized and operational, they move out of state because of XYZ factors. I think there's a real opportunity here, and I know this mindset has been contemplated about taking that innovation and bringing it to places that are slightly more lower cost, like the Berkshire area. You know, this is very early stages, but how could we potentially migrate the success of this grant, the next stage application, phase 3 for the Berkshire Innovation Center, with this idea of keeping, innovation in the state and transferring it to areas that make more economic sense?
Yeah, I think the BIC and the community is already trying to do this. We're already building partnerships with universities like MIT and UMass. We had the chancellor of UMass here meeting with us, working with MCLA, Williams, BCC, and building, because you're right, Massachusetts does so well because of our workforce, because of our education, and then people maybe don't stay because costs can be high. And if you look just 120-ish miles west, you're still in Massachusetts, you're still getting that same great workforce, but it's much more affordable, there's so much more opportunity, and boy, we're equal to Boston, New York City, close to Hartford, close to Montreal, and part of a corridor that I think is growing and becoming more substantial all the way to Buffalo, Albany, and the entire region. So I think you have great partners working on it, and me and my colleagues in the legislature are certainly committed to that, as well as our congressional delegation.
Perfect. I'm glad I planted that question with Eric. Thank you, Eric. I think there's a lot of questions, and it's going to keep evolving as this conversation goes on. So hopefully you guys can stick around for a little bit as the panel goes on. But I want to thank you, Galen. Thanks you for traveling out here. I know you have roots here in Pittsfield, and you love coming out here in Senator Mark. I know you travel. I just did some quick math. That's over 50,000 miles a year. So thank you for coming and always supporting the BIC and being here. So thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah.